So as we've seen, San Diego Comic-Con 2020 was a mess as far as it comes to Funko's drops, but I'm more focused on what this means for the future. So we're going to talk about it. Yo guys, what is up and welcome back to a new video. So today we're going to be talking about mainly the issues that people had with Funko's drops when it came to San Diego Comic-Con 2020, whether it be on their website themselves or shared retailers, and also what this means for the future of Funko as far as when it comes to cons within the near future or until at least things get back to normal. Now I'm having to do this weird because my camera's giving me issues for some reason. It's only recording basically like up to 10 minutes and then stopping recording on itself. I think it might be one of my SD cards that's bad or something, so I'm having to time myself here. But I also have here kind of just a list of things to kind of guide me to talk about while this video goes on. So I guess we'll talk about this within chronological order of things that happen. So the first thing we'll talk about is Funko shops themselves. Now I know that Funko shop, we all seen it. You saw the many videos, many angry videos, many rants of how it is. If you haven't seen any of them, long story short, the site was as bad as we expected it to be. The site was a mess. The drop was a mess. A lot of people left angry, some left happy, but it was not a happy experience for many. So we'll talk about, again, within the Funko shop, kind of things that people had issues with just as things went on. So the first thing that people had an issue with was the implementation of the queue system. Now, if you don't know how the queue system works, normally how it's supposed to work is it's supposed to basically be a first come first serve system as you enter the queue, and you'll be let in to purchase your items, basically first come first serve. But as we've seen, that wasn't the case because there were some people entering the queue right away who managed to get through, and they managed to get through really late, and some people who managed to take their time to add stuff and they managed to get in really fast. Now let me preface this though, as the queue being in place isn't the issue. It doesn't matter if you manage to get in within 5 seconds, add to cart and check out, and you were automatically put into a queue. It doesn't matter how fast you were, because you have to remember there are tens to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, also going for this drop. This drop wasn't exclusively for Funko collectors. There were a bunch of people also who wanted San Diego Comic-Con items that would have bought them at the con as well, who aren't diehard collectors, who are casual collectors, who are just people who saw, hey, Funko's releasing San Diego Comic-Con stuff, let me get some stuff. So it doesn't matter how fast you were going to be put in that queue regardless, because it doesn't matter, again, if 5 seconds you click checkout, there were also probably hundreds of thousands of people who also went through within 5 seconds. So that's just how it is. But the queue itself was interesting because it's brought up by another YouTuber, Dr. Applesauce. He brought up the point of how he believed that the queue wasn't letting in people first come first serve, that it was being done randomly. And I agree, because I think that is how the queue system was working itself, because we've seen Funko operate a queue system when it's first come first serve. It was sometime around the holidays, maybe like 2 years ago, but people managed to exploit that and bypass the queue, and that kind of idea was canned. So what we saw within the Funko shop was actually kind of a random allotment and random selection to buy items. And ironically enough, that's how it is when buying San Diego Comic-Con badges when they release. So how San Diego Comic-Con handles it, and how I think the Funko shop handled it, however their system was doing the queue, is when you enter the queue, you are given a random number, a random group to be pulled in with that you don't know. So let's say you manage to get in the 5 seconds flat, and the queue assigns you letter Z. Somebody who took 20 seconds or 25 seconds might be given letter B. Of course, B is going to get pulled before whatever letter I just named, or whatever letter I just said, L or Z, whatever. Now, once people got through the queue, of course, we saw the issue of shipping rates with the infinite shipping rate circle. This is nothing new, and unfortunately, it is a problem that needs to be fixed. But what's important to note is that this issue isn't Funko. It's not the site's issue themselves. It is not Funko.com's issue itself. It's not Funko's issue itself. What you need to remember is that Funko is operating the website through a third-party company, which is Shopify. Shopify is no stranger to handling e-commerce businesses and stuff like that, or collectible sales, or sales in general online. About 90% of collectibles, I would say, operate through Shopify, and usually those sites operate fairly because they're not attracting the huge amount of traffic like that. So what we're seeing is hundreds of thousands of people, because the shipping rate issue has happened when it has been a really hot drop and there's been a lot of traffic. I can remember it happening for the Dwight with Princess Unicorn, which was a hot drop, and it happened for this. Before, it was just usually the issue of the site being slow, which again, that might be a Shopify thing, that might be the actual Funko site itself, that like it might be a Funko.com issue itself, but it would be confusing because the site can somewhat hold up during huge drops, but it's just the shipping rates issue, which is Shopify's fault. So unfortunately, this is something that has to be fixed. I think it will be fixed. It's just something that Shopify, I think they always undervalue with how much of an issue it's going to be come drop time. I think Shopify thinks that they've set up enough in place to kind of prevent it from happening, but then it happens, and then they have to just be more of a reactive force with fixing it in the moment. Now, you can kind of see a glimpse of how this works through two controversial YouTubers, if you know about the YouTube world and its own system. Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star, they had made kind of a docu-series covering Shane Dawson's release of his makeup, but the highlight of that I'm bringing up for is because they covered a segment when it came to drop time and them having to operate with Shopify and kind of keep in constant contact with them because their site had also crashed. So I can only imagine that's what Funko was doing when handling their website. I can only imagine that they were going back and forth trying to figure out and being like, hey, this isn't the first time this has happened. You guys said this wouldn't happen. What's going on? And then Shopify just has to be purely reactive and being like, okay, we're doing what we can. So this definitely does need to be fixed. This is an issue, and this definitely does need to get fixed before the future cons, because now we've seen how bad it can be for one con, and we're just going to have to expect it for the rest. Now, the next issue is kind of people wanting there to be cart reservations, and by that is the item being reserved in your cart once you add it to your cart. And people want this because what they're experiencing is cartjacking. Now, if you don't know what cartjacking is, it's pretty self-explanatory. You have the item in your cart, you're going through the checkout process, and you click finish payment, and it says sold out. And the item basically was checked out by somebody else who also had the item in their cart. And a lot of websites do this because it's just basically a first come, first serve. As soon as you add it to your cart, you have to be the fastest to check out with whatever stock quantity they have. Now, people want it to be where once you add it to your cart, you get it reserved. And I need people to know that this won't solve the issue. This will make things worse. For example, let's say we had it in place for San Diego Comic-Con. And people were trying to go for the Black Lightning pop. I can guarantee you within a second of the site being live, Black Lightning would be sold out or reserved in all carts because you have hundreds of thousands of people adding it to their cart, and as soon as it was added to their cart, it would no longer be available. Let's just say Bakugo had 10,000 pops online, and it'd be the same thing. Maybe within 3 seconds, it would be all gone. And people would be upset about that. They'd be like, well, that's not fair. You should let it be, whoever's checking out be the first ones to check it out. It's just something that there won't ever be a clear solution to please people. They can do one thing, it'll please some, it'll anger a lot. They can do another thing, it'll please some, it'll anger a lot. That's the thing with Funko collectors in general, that I think it's the ugly side of collecting. And it's not everybody that's like this, but there is a good handful that makes up the collecting world and who collectors are and who you see at the face, and they can never be pleased. It's kind of like always like gimme, I want it my way, like type thing, and they can never be pleased, and they're only happy if they manage to get their items. But if they don't get the items, then they're pissed and they want things to be different. So cart and item reservations will never be a solution. I can promise you it will be terrible how that works, and it'll just make things worse. Now, people also had the issue with how Funko had handled their apology and stuff like that, and some people were questioning why they had there was a picture that they put up once like the shipping rate issue came up, and people were like, well, why do they have it pre-made and all that? Well, you gotta understand, they've experienced this already once before, and they didn't know what to basically respond to us. So being a company, knowing that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, are going for this drop, and the site could potentially have issues again, of course they're going to have the thing pre-made. They can't guarantee that the site will be fine given that it's had issues already in the past. So it's better to have that image made and kind of let people know what's going on, rather than to just leave us in the quiet, having to figure out what the hell's going on, and just hopefully we manage to get through. I think people being upset about that is just people trying to find things to be upset at because they were upset that they didn't get their items. They were upset how Funko handled the situation. And they were upset how how the website operated. Which it's fine to be upset, but at least we got some type of message rather than nothing. And I also agree with their apology video that Brian Mariotti had did before they aired Fun TV. And people were upset about that because they said he was reading a script. It's not genuine. It's better to get that rather than nothing. I appreciate them for doing that. I appreciate Brian Mariotti for doing that and for representing Funko and everybody at Funko, acknowledging that there's a problem. He acknowledged that there's a problem. He acknowledges that they need to get it fixed, and he acknowledges our frustration. That's important going forward with this, because now we at least know that Funko and their CEOs and Brian Mariotti understand that we get upset when stuff like this happens and that it is a reoccurring problem. So now kind of going on to how this was handled in stores and the issues people had with that. It was kind of a similar issue with how it was on the Funko shop, with there being limited stock. So the night of the online drops, we saw some websites going early and their stuff selling out fast. The most notorious one out of this was Hot Topic, and people had issues with them releasing their items early. Now I agree that's completely messed up, especially when you have people being ready at a certain time, because maybe they had previous stuff, but they had set an alarm to be ready. And how this poses an issue is this was a case where I think bots did win compared to manual users. Now, if you don't know how a bot works, just long story short, it automatically checks out your items for you through tasks that you set up. You can look up videos. There's videos all over YouTube for it, especially within like the shoe collecting world and all that. So when you have tasks from bots being ran to automatically pick up keywords and it being dropped 15 minutes early, the people running their tasks on their bots are going to be the ones getting the items, compared to manual users having to figure out from a tweet, and then by then now you have the droves of tens of hundreds of thousands of people going on at once, and the item sells out quick. Hot Topic botched that drop. They shouldn't have done that. They should have just stuck to the 12:01 whatever 12:01 Eastern time drop that they had said, and then the next day it just kind of added on to the wound, because a lot of stores didn't get stock at all, and if stores did get stock, they got very limited stock. And they kept their 5 per SKU per person rule. So stores that had gotten like 15 per pop or something, like 15 Nightcrawlers or 15 Gokus or whatever, the first like 3 people were able to buy them up, and people were very upset about that. And I understand that frustration. That's something that shouldn't have happened. But I think the issue was that corporate is the one who sets those limits, and they tell the stores, okay, that's what you got to tell people. So I think that corporate had anticipated that, oh, it's just going to be a normal San Diego Comic-Con drop. We're going to have these in our stores for months, so might as well just let them buy 5 per. But what had happened was they got in a dramatically less amount of stock that they had anticipated, and that's why we saw the first 2-3 people buying up everything, because of how limited the items were. This is something that definitely is going to need to be fixed for when it comes to future cons, as long as the stock is an issue going into these cons and all that. And this kind of leads into the future part of where I think Funko will be going with how this was handled and how the stock is going to be an issue when it comes to future cons. But before we get to that point, I don't know if I had addressed it already, but people had an issue also with bots. And of course, bots are always going to be an issue within Funko, within collecting, within just anything that attracts a lot of people to buy things and has a secondary market value. Keep in mind, we're the ones who give the secondary market value because we're the ones who purchase these items. We don't have to buy it from them. We don't have to buy from resellers, but we do, and that's what maintains the item value. And whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, item value is important within Funko collecting for a lot of people, and it's what drives the popularity and hype around it. What you need to know, though, is that bots did not take all the stock from the Funko shop, from Hot Topic, from all that. From Hot Topic, they probably took a good amount of stock because they were the first ones to pick up, but you need to also realize that there were hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, going for these items, and there were only an X amount of items. So there was only 3,000 Black Lightning. 3,000 bots didn't check out all those like items. There's probably around like maybe 25 to 30% of people who had bots who manage to check out and get their items, and that's only if they successfully manage to get them. Because Funko, on their shop, they managed to combat bots, but the way they combated bots was they made sure that bots couldn't check out, but they also made sure that manual users couldn't check out. So bots will unfortunately always be an issue, and that's just something that we got to adapt and combat, because they won't go away. They'll always be there as long as Funko has that hype and has that secondary value. But it's important to note and to keep into the mindset that I know it's easier to blame bots because it's easier to accept, oh, they had the unfair advantage, so I was SOL. But we also got to remember that there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people going for the same items. And, it's just basically a free-for-all when it comes to that. I apologize if the camera looks like it's being shifted in any way. I keep having to go back and manually turn on the camera and then turn it off and re-record because it keeps giving me that error. Now, going into the future of Funko and how I think things will be handled for this is that it's going to be interesting to see how conventions will be handled now. I think the last normal convention as far as when it came to stock quantities that we saw was, I'm not sure if it was Emerald City Comic Con that came before or after WonderCon, but it was one of those. And the reason why I think that was the last normal stock con or normal con when it came to quantities within stock is because it normally takes around 4 to 6 months turnaround rate for them to get a pop made, whether it be starting from getting the license to having it in hand. Now, for WonderCon and for Emerald City Comic Con, they had probably these items being made since maybe August or October of 2019. So they were already being produced, and this was before things had started to get bad and whole factories were shutting down, and Funko themselves and their company was taking a hit. That's why we saw such a low amount of quantity for San Diego Comic-Con, because they would have to have submitted their items to be made pretty earlier within 2020, and this was right when things started to get a little bit bad. And then when things started to get real bad, that's probably when their factories had shut down completely, and Funko just needed something rather than nothing to be put out for the convention. Now, where it gets interesting is that New York Comic Con is in October. Now, if we give it just the overestimation of the 6-month turnaround, they would have had to have submitted their items to be made and all that and get the process started right around February of 2020. This is when things basically took a turn for the worse within the US when it came to COVID-19 and when factories had started to shut down, because at that point I believe there were factory issues for a lot of companies, not just for Funko, but a lot of companies that sell items and all that. So fortunately, factories have started to reopen. We see that Funko is starting to produce items, but we've seen that the real low quantity items, even their Wednesday normal drops that they do, they sell out quick and they're gaining value because there's a small amount that's being made. Now, going into New York Comic Con, we need to basically anticipate that the mess that San Diego Comic Con had brought and what happened for San Diego Comic Con will happen again for New York Comic Con. There could be some miracle, there could be some, turnaround where they manage to start making products way earlier and they have a bit more quantity made, but that just wouldn't make sense in my mind, because why couldn't they have done that for San Diego Comic Con if that came first, and they would have had to have gotten those items made earlier? So just be ready for another mess to happen like it had happened for San Diego Comic Con. Be ready for items to be limited. Be ready for there to be kind of just random items that might not make sense, kind of like how it did for me for San Diego Comic Con. I felt like a good portion of those items were intended to be commons or store exclusives, but because Funko already was behind on what they wanted to release, they just were like, let's get these out for San Diego Comic Con. Let's have something rather than nothing. And I think the same will be happening for New York Comic Con, where they're just going to be like, let's have something rather than nothing. Let's just get things made and have somewhat of a stock of items to be ready for the convention. So in conclusion, just be ready to anticipate the worst when it comes to New York Comic Con, as far as when it comes to your experience of checking out items and getting what you want. This is a time where we have to transition to kind of keeping that fun with Funko and getting the items that we want, and keeping that collecting spirit alive. But it's also Funko having to maintaining of them being a company and making a profit and staying afloat, and them trying to keep it fun for us and get items released. There's always going to be a hard medium to reach, whether it be in scenarios like this or in scenarios where they're trying to please us where it comes to like combating bots and stuff like that. But that's going to do it for me, guys, for this video. If you liked the video, please give it a like. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I got a lot more great content coming out for you guys. I can't really give out what I'm giving out, but I am creating this video that's kind of going to be a little bit of like a documentary type video, kind of talking about the age-old debate within Funko, the debate and question you hear being whispering around the corners, whispering in Funko stores, whispering at conventions. You probably already know what it is, but it's basically, I would say, the age-old debate with Funko ever since it started to gain its popularity. So that's going to do it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next one.